I have all kinds of bottles of water here.
Perfect. We're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Carl Hassell, Hassell. And we've just become friends through the internet. He listens to some of my shows, but he has an interesting background and a story about this organization that he became a member of in Arizona. Title of it is the Peyote Way Church of God, and it's been around since 1978. And he has tons of information. I was trying to get through a lot of it, but it's a very interesting story, and I don't think a lot of people have heard it. So I titled this one "The Strange Tale of the Peyote Way Church of God," and Carl can talk more about that. So, Carl, welcome to the show. Thanks for agreeing to come on and tell your story.
Thanks for having me, William. Hello, audience. I was a member of the Peyote Way Church of God from 1998 to roughly sometime in 2015 when I quit, and officially told them in 2016 after doing a lot of research and a lot of reading. I had discovered I was being lied to by commission and omission, and I really was angry about it. I was actually furious and did a lot of raging. They are.
How did you even find this church, and how did you get involved back in '98?
I was sitting in a doctor's office, and there was a High Times magazine on the magazine rack, and the name Peyote caught my eye. And I said, "Oh, wow, I haven't thought of peyote since the 1970s. I had taken a lot of peyote when I lived in Arizona." And so I wrote to him and paid for a membership, and then went down and visited, and ended up visiting multiple times, maybe a dozen or so times.
And where is it? It's up in the mountains of Arizona, right?
They're in southeastern Arizona. They're kind of midway between Phoenix and Tucson in the eastern part of Arizona. They're a quasi-religious organization, that quasi-legal status in several states for all race peyote use. They were founded by a guy named Emmanuel Trujillo, who has very dubious origins. The earliest information I can find about him when I was doing my research and putting things together was in 1953. He had been, after he got out of the Army, he had joined something called the National Renaissance Party, which was a right-wing organization in New York City headed by James Madall. He was working undercover on the payroll of the ADL and infiltrated the NRP and gradually took it over by 1953. His job was to foment anti-Semitism. He was sending boxes of anti-Semitic literature all over Europe and the United States to drum up donations from Jews that were basically scared. And he was trying to foment riots and etc. He was on the payroll of a man named Sanford Griffith. Now, he was connected to all kind of espionage, and Griffin paid for Mana's apartment, printing press, his motorcycle, some new boots, and he was tasked with going down south and starting riots and developing gun connections. That never happened because he broke his leg in a motorcycle accident. The FBI files, there's hundreds and hundreds of pages that mention him by name and have his name redacted. And when you go through it, you realize who they're talking about.
Right. They have multiple names. So he had Mana, Trueheart, Manny, True Hill, but his given name supposedly was Manny Trujillo.
Emmanuel Trujillo.
Emmanuel Trujillo. So there's different variants. And even his stated, like, real patrimony is in question too, right? Like,
yes,
where he was actually born. So very suspicious. But the ADL, that's a whole nother story. But they to stay in business, Anyway, so it didn't start recently. This goes back to the 50s. But he was, you're saying, a front even back then in the 50s.
Yes, he actually went by, as far as Canadian authorities are concerned, 10 different aliases.
Oh, wow.
He claims to have been born originally on the San Carlos Apache Reservation as a full-blooded Apache, but in his 1955 book, this book is from 1955, and he wrote it in the section about the author. He was born in Pennsylvania of a Catholic mother and an Apache father. that book.
What's the title of that book, Carl?
I'm going to show it again. It's I Love You, I Hate You, My 6 Weeks of Free Love with Pat Ward.
There it is. Gotcha. Okay.
Now, if you can find a copy of this book, please get it, because they're buying as many copies as they can find. That book destroys the entire narrative of Peyote Way and the Manna Pottery Company. It shatters everything in their official narrative.
What is the official narrative?
The official narrative is Emmanuel is half Apache and half Jewish and was born in a Red Cross shelter. Well, yeah, he was born in a Red Cross shelter, adopted by a family in New Jersey and raised as the name of James Coyle. Supposedly, he ran away and joined the British Merchant Marines, got out of that, and then joined the U.S. Army and was blown up in an accident and had a piece of skull repaired and his ribs rewired and his jaw rewired and a pole in his leg. And as it turns out, it doesn't say that at all in about the author section. Again, that book is key to destroying the myth that they have set up. Now, that book, as you can see, it was published by Andre Levy, and that's an imprint name for Samuel Roth, who was a huge pornographer. And some of our modern pornography laws came as a result of Samuel Roth and his shenanigans.
He was constantly being arrested and tried for publishing pornographic. He spent a
lot of his life in prison. And in the end of his life, he spent a lot of time in prison, too. He also published Pat Ward's story at the same time in 1955. She was involved with Trujillo. They rode motorcycles together and tore up New York. I kind of lost my track here.
Well, she was interesting too. She was involved in some kind of prostitution charge, right? Yes. So Trujillo had an interesting background. Yeah,
she was a high-class call girl, and she was involved with Mickey Jelke, the Oleo heir, and he was busted for pimping and pandering. Well, Emmanuel ended up taping his apartment to be the star witness in the second trial of Jelke. Now, Pat Ward's real name was Patricia Wysocki. She was a Polish girl, and she was a high-class prostitute. So he was taping everything in his apartment and was a star witness for the FBI. And some of that is detailed in his book, and a lot of it is detailed in the FBI files. When you go through the files for the National Renaissance Party, you'll see all of his shenanigans. And I actually collected 13 books, 2 pamphlets, and hundreds of newspaper and magazine articles chronicling him. And he was really a trip, man. I knew him personally a little bit. I talked with him several times face to face. And he actually told me he was never a drunken Indian. He wasn't like that. Well, as it turns out, he was tearing up the bars every night in New York. In 1956, he was arrested in Canada for a cannabis smuggling scheme. One of his partners was actually an undercover Royal Canadian Mounted Police narc, and she busted them when they were crossing the border with 700 joints he was going to sell in New York. He ended up doing 2 years in prison. When he got out of prison, the next thing you know, he appears in 1960 as a full-blooded Apache artist. He's been married multiple times, and Canadian authorities, like I said, figured he had 10 different aliases he was working under. He was in Toronto illegally, sneaking in and out. He claims to have started an all-race charter of peyote use for the Native American Church, but they denied he ever applied for a charter. And they also said if he did, they would have denied it. They wouldn't allow it. Once Schedule 1 happened, when LSD was made illegal in October of 66, he was busted in Denver for a large quantity of LSD, hashish, and peyote. He claimed the peyote is mine. I don't know anything about the LSD or hash. Well, it worked through the courts, and then he was acquitted of all charges. The case is Manapardayatan v. Denver. It's a famous case, and that opened up the door to all-race peyote use.
And he was also, Trujillo was also involved in the Communist Party. So he was supposedly a communist the farthest is the far right, drawing Hitler
Yes,
pictures.
he
too,
went
right?
to something called the Jefferson School in New York. It was a communist front. And he claimed to have been a communist since 1948 when he got out of the service.
Right. So it does something. They don't. Communists and Nazis don't fit together. So something is going on. Very suspicious. And there's talk about him in a book about Francis Yockey, right? Because you have
Yes,
that the
the
Dreamer
dreamer
of the Day, Francis Parker Yockey, and the Portrait. Because he is still an important thinker. Yockey is in the far right today. So
Yeah,
it's
his book
interesting.
Imperium is still used by rightist groups. It's like a classic primer or primer.
No,
Yeah,
it's still
so
in. It's actually in the ONA. They actually use their ideal state is based off of Yockey, which is a dark imperium, but they still have that kind of fascist.
yeah, and Trujillo
Pedigree
was
from
involved with
Yockey.
motorcycle gangs his entire life. He wrote in the 1950s with several gangs, and all the way up to his death in 2010, he was involved with the Chingaling Nomads and was made an honorary member and started the Arizona chapter of the Chingaling Nomads. When he was arrested numerous times in the 1950s for pimping and pandering, and he had a stash of German weapons. He would have underage girls in various states of undress, attracting men to the apartment where he would give lectures. And one week, this is all chronicled in FBI files and some of the dozen books that I've collected about him. He had a poster of Stalin on the wall and communist literature on the table. And then 2 weeks later, he would have a picture of Hitler and National Socialist literature. Right. And he would basically hold these lectures and rant and rave about the Jew and this and that, and it's pretty wild,
Right. He had a very colorful background. I mean, did you ever come across anything of that, how close he was tied to the U.S. government at that time? You said that they have FBI files about him, but some of the stuff was redacted.
Yeah. And I think I sent you like 24 files that actually name him. And if you go through the FBI stuff under the National Renaissance Party, you'll see hundreds of pages where they talk about him, and he was tasked with going down south and starting riots. The riots were supposed to be in retaliation for the Brown v. Board of Education decision, allowing black children to go to white schools. He was supposed to stir up trouble over that. And as I said, that didn't work out. But he was injured in a parachute jump and mustered out of the Army on a 30% disability. It doesn't say anything in his book about being a war hero and getting blown up at the island of Heligoland like the official narrative. Let's see.
Right. So there's tons of files on him as True Hill, as the National Renaissance Party, right?
Yes.
Did you see anything that he was affiliated or had any far right connections when in your research into him? Like, was he associating with Rockwell or any of these other characters or anybody out of the UK? Did you come across
That's a whole other
like
topic, because he bragged about killing George Lincoln Rockwell and Dan Burroughs, who was a Jew that was part of the American Nazi Party undercover. Emmanuel has bragged, and it's common knowledge in Peyote Way, that he killed both of them. And I have a whole slew of evidence that points to it just may well have been him.
Well, that would be very interesting, because somebody got arrested for killing Rockwell in Arlington, Virginia.
John Patler was arrested for it. And they found a German-made weapon submerged near the crime scene. And witnesses said there were two people on the roof. And that's a whole nother story going into.
Well, it is interesting. Well, right. But it is interesting, like what happens in some of these groups, like that could be engineered, Rockwell.
Yeah. And Emmanuel bragged to me one time. He said, if I have a problem, I throw money at my lawyer till he makes it go away. And if the problem is big enough, I put one in the head and one in the chest. Now, he told me this face to face across the kitchen table out there at the ranch. And the FBI files said they pulled 2 bullets out of Rockwell. And there's multiple stories that say he had one in the head and one in the chest. And there's also news reports that say he was only shot once. So that's a very weird discrepancy there.
It is weird.
And by the way, in all of his arrests for pimping and pandering and the Germans' weapons, he escaped out of that. He never got charged with anything. He slipped right through the fingers, was never charged. So in 1970, he knew Timothy Leary. He knew he lived at Millbrook. He knew every countercultural figure of the 1960s personally, Peggy and Billy Hitchcock. He actually lived on Peggy Hitchcock and Walter Bowert's land in Tucson, and he knew Walter Bowert, the founder of the East Village Other, at the founding of that magazine. They were good buddies.
And there you go, right into mind control, right? Search for the Manchurian Candidate. Often,
he knew Art Kleps from the Boohoo Neo-American Church. He worked with and set up an ashram with Bill Haynes, the psychedelic yoga master. Tim Leary and Billy Hitchcock paid for 3 properties for Emanuel and some of his buddies to set up an ashram where they did pottery, yoga, and took a lot of LSD and peyote.
Right, in Arizona too, right?
Yes, sir.
Fairly close. So you can see that kind of culture creation. Yeah, culture creation.
He was a lifelong friend of Rosemary Leary and kept a framed in his bedroom. He kept a framed note from her. They used to correspond right up to her death.
That was the wife who was the FBI mole, right? I think it was Rosemary.
I don't know. She was married to Leary.
Okay.
I sent various pictures. Leary was instrumental in helping Peyote Way. The founders of Peyote Way used Leary's book, How to Start Your Own Religion, as a guideline to start Peyote Way. And I sent pictures of the medallions, that, including mine, that I had as first-degree clergy. I sent pictures of Tim Leary wearing one, and Rosemary, and various writings by Tim Leary. You'll see the same insignia. It's a circumscribed lotus. And on one side it said LSD, and on the other side it was the circumscribed lotus.
You sent that picture to me?
Yeah, I sent you a few of them.
I must have missed it. There's you have a lot of information.
And that was only a fraction, William. This is a massive topic. And, you know, I've done a few other YouTube shows, and we were supposed to get into a part 3 with one researcher. And I'm still trying to get together a part 2 with a couple of the other researchers. Hopefully they'll have me back on. You know, this thing goes into pornography and the smoking gun of child porn. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And he has a permanent exhibit at the Museum of the American Indian at the Smithsonian, and it's completely bogus. I worked on some of those pieces. There was no way he could produce the volume that they have over there. Excuse me.
Those pieces, what you're talking about is that when you were there off and on for those 17 years, they're creating pottery and things to sell too, right?
Yeah, Manna Pottery Company is the financial arm of the Peyote Way. They're heavily tied. They have a degree system, much like Masonry. There's 1st through 4th degree, and sworn clergy are vowed as vegetarians, and they follow the Word of Wisdom, section 89 of the Mormon book. Now,
Doctrine and Covenants?
Yes, sir. Section 89 they follow as a dietary guideline. I
mean, they're still active. I mean, can you kind of talk about how far you got up at the Peyote Way, what you thought at the beginning, and what you found out that made you leave?
Well, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, and I take people as they come. I don't go researching people, so I was completely naive. I assumed that he was a war hero, and he started all-race peyote use. And then as I was reading Michael Collins Piper, Final Judgment, when I came across his name, Emmanuel Trujillo / Manna Trujillo. And I said, you know what? I know an Emmanuel Trujillo, and his nickname is Manna. So I started researching it, and my head exploded. And I just started reading for several months and started collecting books. I was splurging and buying as many books as I could on my meager budget. And I just lost my mind. And then I contacted the two of the co-founders, Annie and Matthew. She's Reverend Ann Zaff, and he is Rabbi Matthew Kent. Now, he was brought up an Episcopalian, and Trujillo dubbed him rabbi and dubbed her reverend, even though neither of them have any kind of religious training like that. And I sent the link to that. The East Village Other
somewhere. I'm trying to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Right. So they had these two that are out there. I think that they're still involved. Like,
Oh yeah,
they're
they're
still.
Matthew's the president. The last I looked, and him and Annie are the only full-time residents out there. Their kids come and go, but they're out there hosting spirit walks, which is a peyote experience. It's a solitary peyote experience.
Right. So when you were there, you went in because you were interested in it.
I wanted to take peyote legally.
Right. And there was a whole story about the legality of peyote. Didn't it go to the Supreme Court or something like that about whether?
And again, Bill Clinton said it was okay to use for Native Americans in the service, provided they weren't working with nuclear weapons.
Interesting. And there's Andrew Wiles involved. He was supporting Trujillo, and he was with Leary at Harvard at the very beginning of LSD.
Yeah, and
this guy's kind of a
unofficial doctor. Yeah. He's kind of the unofficial doctor over there. I actually at one time had his address and phone number. I was going to give him my medical history and follow his advice, but it never transpired. As I said, Emmanuel knew everybody from the 1960s counterculture movement, absolutely everybody. And curiously, in 1967, in March, the same month Charles Manson showed up on Haight Street, Emmanuel was on Haight Street handing out LSD and peyote. Now, the San Francisco Oracle put out a flyer that said, "Manna is the man, be careful." Then they retracted it and said, "No, Manna is cool. He's the leader of the Native American Church," which he is not. He was not the leader of the Native American Church. And the East Village Other did several interviews with him in 66 and 67. As I said, he knew Walter Bauer personally. And so they retracted that statement. And then curiously, one of the men that ratted him out was busted for cannabis and never heard from again. And Walter Bauer and the staff at the Oracle, and you could see this in the Oracle archives. I'm pretty sure I sent you those links too. They retracted the statement and then said, "No, Manna's a good guy." And they all signed it in their own name: Walter Bauer, Harry Krishna, and a guy named Michael something or other. I don't have it with me right now, but he was a massive cannabis smuggler also.
Interesting. So he's a massive. Yeah. This guy's fully connected, but externally he's like a holy wise man. When you came across the Peyote Church of God, right?
Yeah, he's a legend. I mean, the guy is a legend. He's pretty amazing, and he was completely propped up. His book was advertised in multiple newspapers around the country in 1955. I sent you 2 or 3 links from different newspapers announcing the book. And the researcher, Joseph Atwill, said, "Well, that's a classic sign. This guy is a plant and a lifetime actor. When they start pumping you up like that, nobody, who the hell is this guy?" And all of a sudden he's got this book out chronicling his adventures with Pat Ward.
Right. So
he's a lifetime actor.
He was your position is that he was a lifetime actor doing that.
Absolutely. Right? And the last time I talked to him, my son and I were in his bedroom, and he was on oxygen the last few years. He still had a National Socialist flag on one wall and the flag with the swastika on the other wall, and he had a drawer full of German marks. So he was still ideating on some level. I don't know if this stuff was trophies or not, but who the hell has those kind of flags hanging on their wall, in the 2000s? Right,
doesn't make sense. Wow. And just all these strange connections. There he is with Jelke. We talked about that earlier. These are all the FBI files. This is all on archive. I think you sent me this.
Exactly. That's where I found it all. I tried to go through a military site to see what exactly his role was in the U.S. Army, but I didn't have the numbers, his wartime numbers that you needed. I gave the guy as much information as I could, and he looked into it and said, "Man, I can't find anything on this dude." So I kind of lost out there, and I never filed a Freedom of Information Act due to I'm kind of a dummy, and I probably didn't have enough money to do that anyway. But he was a trip to talk to. He lied to my face. He lied to my face, and so did Matthew Kent. Matthew told me personally, through no solicitation on my own, he said, Carl, Emmanuel's a ghost. I looked on the internet just for the hell of it, and there's nothing there. He's not on the internet at all. He was always a shadow man. So like I said, when I read that Michael Collins Piper book, I got this trove of information and started collecting books that talk about his escapades. And I said, holy cow, man, I got to stop being so trusting and thinking people, hippie guru, peyote guy,
Right. And wasn't Bill Walton associated with all this, the basketball player too?
Yes, he still is. He was going to buy some land next to them. There's a hot spring next to their property. He was going to buy it, and he has been a friend of theirs since at least 1980, and he also is a celebrity collector of the Manna pottery art, as was Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, Whoopi Goldberg. And what's crazy is I've got a list of 30 people, and they all came out to San Francisco from New York within like a 4-year period of each other. And almost every name on there is from New York. And going back to Samuel Roth, the pornographer, he was affiliated with Columbia University there. And so were many of these other people. Peter Coyote there's Rosemary wearing the medallion right there.
Gotcha. So she's got the peyote. I'm pretty sure that's the FBI informant. She was giving information to me. And I think that even at one point at the very end of his life, Leary admitted that he was working with the CIA.
Since at least 1962, he said, if I remember right. Yeah. And that supposedly is the same year Emmanuel met him, and they traded peyote and LSD, and they got interested in each other and did the whole Millbrook thing. And at Millbrook, when G. Gordon Liddy raided the Millbrook mansion, everybody was busted except Emmanuel. He had a little pottery studio in the front house on the property. Everybody got popped but him. And again, he escaped an arrest.
Right. That's very telling.
Yeah. He did get arrested a couple times throughout the 80s and escaped out of that one too. He was, it was like, oh, you're using peyote religiously. No problem. You're an Indian, blah, blah, blah. So he never really got into any trouble outside of appearing in court and then escaping. And it's really amazing because he actually talked to the FBI in 1980 when a couple of the members were busted in Texas. And it's like, how the hell did they not put together, this is the same dude from the 1950s? Well, it's because he's got all these aliases.
Right.
I got a nice picture here I'd like to show everybody.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I've got all kinds of shit here, but here's another picture. This is very similar to the picture you'll find of Quanah Parker, the guy who started the Native American Church. And of course, Quanah Parker was a half-breed. He was half white and half Comanche. And most of the entire original staff of the Native American Church were half-breeds and white people.
Interesting.
So what we're looking at is weaponized anthropology and academic fraud.
What's the academic fraud part? Is just that people were promoting him when he wasn't really what he said he was?
Yeah, and that exhibit at the Smithsonian. There's a massive amount of stuff he sent there in crates for several years. He's got a permanent exhibit there. Now, there's no way one guy could produce all that pottery. And I know for a fact that many visitors out there would sit around and, paint psychedelic dots and shit on teacups and plates and ashtrays. I sent a picture of my son and I actually painting some of that stuff. And I wrote to the Smithsonian. They did not know I was a member. And I said, how did you verify Emmanuel Trujillo is an Apache and actually produced that massive amount of art? It took 4 emails and a threat before they answered me. And they said, oh, we contacted the church and they admitted that many hands worked on that pottery. And then I let it go at that. It's like, okay, they still, I never told them. There's my first degree clergy / lifetime membership. As I said, they're very Mason tasteful, a taste of Masonry there. They have 1st through 4th degree. Emmanuel was a 4th degree clergy. And one of the co-founders brags that his brother is Army intelligence and they're Masons. They're Freemasons. And that's like, oh, well, that's interesting. So we've got the Army intelligence and Freemasonry involved there. And they do go to the Mormon temple down there near the ranch. And it's like, but they told me when I first joined, we're not Mormons, we're not affiliated with them. But as I showed you, they are an official recognized sect of the Mormon Church, and they belong to something called the United Order. And I supplied the links for that right from the Mormon Church itself.
And that's you right there holding a bunch of peyote, right?
Yeah, that's me in my other life with a couple of peyote plants.
50. So what's the United Order? I've never heard that.
That was started by Joseph Smith. You know, you could find any information online about that. I did send some links that explain what it is. It's easy enough to find. Just type in United Order Mormons. There's tons of information. But they don't tell people this when they join. You think it's basically a hippie, loosely organized thing, quasi-religious status to take peyote. And I tell you that the large majority of their membership is white men, you know, and most of the membership is in California and Arizona.
How many people were involved in it when you were in it?
I don't know. There was about 150 official members. There's people that are on the membership rolls that aren't official. They're affiliated with them and they don't want their name dragged into it. There's somebody on the board at Columbia University at one time, and Peter Coyote, the actor. Annie and Matthew stayed at my house 5 times over the years. We were like a halfway point between their place in Arizona and Humboldt County, where we both had mutual friends. So they would set up shop at my house and visit, and then go on and visit up north. But one afternoon, Peter Coyote actually called, and Annie was on the phone with him here in my living room. His peyote was looking a little bit peaked, and he needed some advice on how to perk it up. Yeah, Bill Walton is an associate member, as I said. And the Goldwater department store featured Manna pottery for years and years and years. And that's where a lot of money came from originally. And I sent along links with Barry Goldwater and Richard Nixon thanking Emmanuel for his beautiful artwork. Now, if you go back and look, his art doesn't look like any Apache artwork. You can compare it to Apache artwork, and it looks nothing like what he was producing. There's a lot of milieu control. There's a lot of cult of personality. I like to compare things to the Robert Lifton book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. They have an 8-point criteria for judging ideological, political, and religious organizations to see if it's a psychological coercion cult or brainwashing. And they fit a couple of categories there. This is a picture of Alexander Shulgin, Dr. Shulgin, who invented MDA and several hundred psychedelic chemicals. That's him and his wife, Anne. In back of them, the guy with the long hair is John Hanna, formerly of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS. And then we have Annie and Matthew there in the foreground next to Anne Shulgin.
Right. So that's the two kind of new leaders, is the two people in the front row, far right, right?
That's Annie and Matthew down there. Right. Yeah.
And they're wearing, that's the symbol of
you can see
peyote, right?
He's got the medallion on there.
Right, the medallion.
And the two ladies in the background are self-proclaimed Berkeley witches. I don't know their names. I never met them. But those pictures were taken in the early 2000s. They came to my house and were very excited about going to meet Dr. Shulgin and slop and spit, talking, comparing notes. And they went over and met him. They were up in the hills of Berkeley there at his lab. And I got a couple of pictures they gave me. They said, here, man, here's, memories. You can have a couple pictures here. And it's like, oh, far out, man. There's Dr. Shulgin. And, as we know, he worked at the DEA for many years and then lost his license. The DEA did a surprise inspection on his lab up there in Berkeley. And the first thing they see is peyote growing on the front stoop in a flower pot. So he got in trouble for that. Then they went inside the lab and found a few things he was working on that they didn't like. So they yanked his DEA license.
Right. I mean, I'm not surprised. It's like, yeah. He's always been in trouble with the law, Shulgin, but he's also still kind of a leading light in the psychedelic
Absolutely.
movement.
Yeah.
And people would just visit him all the time. He was
Yeah,
in another.
He wrote 2 books of psychedelic recipes called Ficle and Thical. It was triethylamines I have known and loved, and phenethylamines I have known and loved. And there was literally several hundred recipes. And as fast as he put them out, the DEA made them a Schedule 1. They were full recipes for, you had to have an organic chemistry background and the equipment and the precursor chemicals, but that was the cookbooks, man. And they're still on sale today. You can find them.
That's amazing.
And there's the symbol again on Leary's Declaration of Evolution. And as I said, they used Leary's How to Start Your Own Religion as a guideline to form Peyote Way.
Interesting. That makes perfect sense. Get a CIA agent or a guy who's a CIA affiliated. Well,
yeah, everybody was dirty except Manna.
Yeah, supposedly. Right. Yeah, I totally believe that. Oh my gosh. I mean, you have tons of pictures. I'm just going through all the stuff, like the links. You got links to the Jefferson School of Social Science, splinter groups, Mormonism.
They're heavily into goddess worship too. A lot of the paintings and artwork show a pregnant woman, and they do a lot of goddess worship. They refer to God/goddess in their literature. How
do they generate money? How does the Church of the Peyote Way generate money?
Well, they have a donation system for spirit walks. You get a membership, and then you go down there and pay X amount of money as a donation for a solitary peyote experience. But the Manna Pottery Company is the financial arm of Peyote Way. And supposedly it was started in 1948 by Emmanuel, but I found examples of pottery dated 1946, and I sent a couple of those to you. So there's another weird logical fallacy happening there.
Got a question from Oswald. He says, is Carl familiar with the friend and mentee of Robert J. Lifton, Steve Hassan? I'm familiar with him. And then furthermore, are there any connections between Peyote Way, COG, and the Moonies?
I don't know anything about that. I've read Lifton's book several times, and it's on the Internet Archives now. I went through 2 copies since the late 70s. Yeah, I was a Moonie for 7 months when I was 18 years old. That's a different thing. But
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But you stayed with this Church of God, Peyote Way Church of God for 17 years, right? So you were in there for a while.
I didn't live out there. Nobody lives out there unless they're in there for an apostleship, which is a 90-day, apprenticeship. Now, I visited several times from 3 to 5 days. My health would only allow me to go 5 days. That was about all I could do. But what's interesting is one of their kids told me this is all bullshit. And everybody that lived out here and set up shop with a teepee, a yurt, laid cement foundation, they all leave because they go crazy from my parents' bullshit. So nobody lives out there. There are people come and go from all over the world. There's some heavyweights that go out there.
No, it is interesting. And what do you think that is there? Do you think that there's a ulterior motive or purpose for putting together the Peyote Way Church of God?
I am convinced, and I said in my very first appearance on YouTube, that it is part of an overarching plan to distract and take people away from their culture, their family, and their religion. You get involved with this hippy-dippy psychedelic shit and start doing the magical goddess thinking, new age crap. It's part of the overall program that is destroying this country. You see now there's a big push for psychedelics all over again with ketamine and psilocybin research. And now it's almost mainstream. And you got Joe Rogan talking DMT, right, which Peyote Way raises those frogs. They've got Bufo alvarez frogs down there, and they milk the sap and dry it out and smoke it. And selected members can, smoke some DMT.
Yeah, he's kind of the modern version. He's actually kind of a promoter. He has all those people on his shows, mushrooms and junk, people who do drugs and all kinds of stuff. So it is interesting that it comes back around. Like he's done some documentary called DMT, the Spirit Molecule.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So this is just one of the different programs you think that are really trying to reshape
Absolutely.
society?
I'm convinced of it.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of years as a kid in psychedelics, and all the way up into the late 80s, I was very heavily involved with LSD and mushrooms, and it's all a fantasy. It's all a psychedelic fantasy. I hate all things hippie now and all things psychedelic. It really just grinds my gears.
Well, it's sold. I think that's what Leary sold all the LSD and stuff, is that it's truly spiritual. So they're saying that this is a spiritual event. You may be high, but he tried to religify it, if that's a word, or tried to give it some kind of spiritual meaning, like this is it. So, but it's really kind of the old.
Peyote way succeeded in that.
But the old becomes new, because that's the way it was back in the past. If you talk about, some of the stuff that was going on in ancient Greece and things like that, it was, it's still, it's very curious. And I think it's damaged a lot of people. A lot of the drug culture has damaged people much more so.
Yeah.
I've met a couple acid casualties myself, so I know that people who got very deep into kind of the deadhead thing. So the dead is run is an op. Peyote Way's an op, Leary's an op. These are all supported or were.
The Rainbow family is an op. The pranksters are an op, and it's all interconnected. You can find merry pranksters that are part of the Rainbow family that go out to Peyote Way that are also on tour with the dead. It's all connected, and that's been my mantra for years and years. It's all connected, and once you start seeing this, it's like, oh my Lord, man!
Right, like Trujillo fits the bill for somebody who has an intel pedigree or something. I mean, that with the names and the not going to jail for a long period of time and support from somewhere, mysterious funds.
It's interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just jokers asking, is Crystal Cole, Todd Skinner story with the missile stylo stuff have anything to do with this?
I don't
Do you know that story?
Yes, I'm very familiar with Pickard.
Yeah, I did an interview, by the way, with McDonough, who knew Pickard. I've talked to Pickard. He's not doing well. I don't even know if he's alive. I know that he was in hospital treatment, but Pickard, I can't remember the title of the book by McDonough, but I'll try to. I think I'll put it back up in circulation. I'll find it and put it up. But Pickard was an interesting guy, but he probably crossed paths with these guys, because I know he was in Arizona.
Well, he's out of jail now. He was let out
right.
COVID. He was doing life. He's out now, and he's lecturing on the psychedelic circuit.
Okay, so he is okay, because he got out of jail because he was sick. Right.
Yeah, Pickard's doing lectures right now and advising these companies that are on the stock market, the stock exchange, regarding psilocybin research.
Yeah, compassionate release.
Of course, one of his labs was a couple of blocks away from the Shoreline Amphitheater, where the Grateful Dead played all the time. He literally was blocks away, one of his labs.
Wow. Yeah, this guy was, I tried to get him on to talk about the Rose of Paracelsus.
I've yet to read that one. That's on my list of stats.
Pickard personally told me to pound sand. Actually, he just told me to go away. So I went away. But anyway, it was an interesting book. I'm trying to remember the name of it, McDonough book. But there's a picture of McDonough I've done like 2 or 3 interviews with.
I'm not familiar at all with that name.
I'll see if I can. I'll have to bring it back up. But you just see that there's a lot of connections. These guys are connected. This guy's connected, very important people in the Peyote Way. And then you can go into some of these other things like the dead, who's hanging out with them, and they're at Bohemian Grove and all this other crazy stuff.
Yeah, and Shulgin was part of Bohemian Grove.
Right, makes perfect sense.
As is Bob Weir and Mickey Hart from the Dead. They're Bohemian Grovers too. He even performed out there a couple of times.
Fascinating. I mean, so what else would you like to cover, or what else do you want to talk about? Let me see.
I would suggest if people can find that book to get it, because it does destroy the entire narrative that has been set up. And, you could go in almost any direction with this guy. I have so much more information. They don't like me. The hippies in Mendocino and Humboldt don't like me anymore. I guess I'm a turncoat, and hero worship I destroyed, and whatever you want to call
it. So, I mean, he was kind of seen as a guru, right? Like this is.
Yes, even though he shunned that and talked about ego. You know, he was supposed to be a stuntman for Charles Bronson and all this other stuff.
Interesting. So he just kept having this mythical background, right?
Yeah, and they keep every now and then they kind of add something new to the tale. And the last several years now he's half Jewish. And you can see, actually, before I forget, you could see throughout magazine and newspaper interviews, starting in 1960, actually starting in 1955 with that book, he has claimed to be 1/4 Apache, 1/2 Apache, and full-blooded Apache.
Huh.
It's all laid out there. You know, I got a newspapers.com subscription and I went pouring through stuff. And a lot of the PDFs didn't transfer well. You have to actually do the original thing because the ink didn't show up or it was blurry. And the same thing with the FBI files. He has claimed, and in interviews, to be 1/4, 1/2, and full-blooded Apache throughout his whole career. It's like you cannot be all of that. That is a logical fallacy. You're either full-blooded or half or 1/4. You can't be all three whenever the whim hits you.
Right.
And his son in 1986 or 7 claimed that he's not even an Indian, that he took on that persona to sell his pottery in Santa Fe. And I linked to that also. And then the son had to go underground and hide because the old boy threatened to kill him.
Wow.
But it's still out there on record online where the son said he is not an Indian. He did that to start the pottery company.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Wouldn't surprise me at all. The name of the interview I did with Dennis McDougal is Operation White Rabbit, LSD, the DEA, and the Fate of the Acid King. And the Acid King was Pickard. So I'm going to repost that so people can just be in tandem with this interview because I think that's interesting too. But Pickard was really one of very few people. No, he's kind of like Shulgin, like one of very few people, but producing tons of, massive amounts of LSD and high quality, like
multiple dozens of grams at a time. You know, and of course, there's 10,000 doses per gram.
Right. So there was and I think that's what the Rose of Paracelsus is about him and the small community of real drug manufacturers that create acid and MDMA. Well, not MDMA, but I think it was acid. I forgot what other drug he was making as well, but
DMT.
Maybe it was DMT. I don't remember, but he had huge operations. So he's an interesting guy. But Carl, what else we're at about 50 minutes. Where can people find your stuff? How can they reach out to you?
I have my own little corner of the universe. I just do Facebook and Twitter. I'll talk with anybody that's sincere, you know, and I'll talk with anybody. I'm gregarious and affable. I love to gab. So I'm on Twitter and Facebook. You know, I don't have my own channel. I'm not out there as what I call an attention whore going, look at me, you know, here's my channel. And that's that. You know, I offer my life experience to those who might want to know what I went through and what I have learned. I will only speak on my experience. I don't talk about anything else unless I actually experienced it and I can prove it. And it keeps things a lot more simple than speculation or projection. Right. It's like, this is my life. This is what I went through. That's that, you know, take it or leave it. And I prove it when I can. I'm very careful about what I say. And that's why I really loaded you up with links and attachments. Right. And as I said, there is so much more. It's outrageous, the amount of information on this guy. And combined with my experience, I can really dig deep with this dude.
But would you take that time back that you spent kind of in the psychedelic community or the peyote community? Would you take that time back if you could? Those 15 years?
If I could live my life over again, I would never use drugs or alcohol at all. I lost a giant chunk of my life chasing around with that shit. I was homeless for 5 years, from 1974 to the end of 1979. Lived all over the place. I was involved with a whole bunch of stuff in Berkeley, and I get in trouble then I'd run to the Indian reservation in Arizona and hide out there with them, with the Havasupai tribe, who, you know, a couple of my friends there turned me on to peyote. And I, you know, it's like my first peyote was in 1975 as an 18-year-old in Austin, Texas. So I was very familiar with it by the time I met Peyote Way. But I regret being so naive, you know, I'd have to say, and I should have checked on them and done some research.
But it is kind of like a culture creation. So all of the infusion of drugs into the American culture post-World War II, there were a lot of people manipulating the culture with those drugs.
Weaponized anthropology.
Yeah, there you go. Just like you said. Carl Hassell, thank you so much. How do you pronounce your last name? Say it again.
It's Hassell. German Hassell.
Hassell, right. Carl Hassell. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for your time, William. I appreciate it.
All right, keep in touch. Stay there.
Bye-bye.
Stay there. Stay there.